Hi there, my name is Stuart, and welcome once again to another build guide video. Today we're going to be building the HPA U Talon Claw, a really solid HPA blaster. For those of you who don't know, HPA, long story short, means that it uses high pressure air in a little tank, and through the regulator, an electromagnetic solenoid, and this supercore, it is a semi-automatic air-powered blaster. So it uses the high-pressure air to propel the dart. Very reliable, very high power. You can easily bust 300 FPS with these things. Semi-auto, so as fast as you can pull the trigger, this thing is firing. Just overall super great and really raises the bar for this hobby. If you see an HPA at an event, you're going to be in for a bit of trouble there because they're just overall really great. Anyways, before I go on too much of a tangent, a little bit about me, just real quick. I've been working here at Frontline Foam for a little over 2 years now. So I'm doing this build guide because I really want to help other people be able to build their own. And I want you guys to know that, I have a good amount of experience building these 3D printed blasters. That doesn't mean I'm the end-all expert. What I want you guys to do is feel free to, use any expertise or experience you may have on top of, what I can share with you. I just want this to be helpful, and I want us to all be able to get these blasters working so we can really shoot some darts. Anyways, a couple things to keep in mind. This blaster, I would say it's a pretty tough build. And I say it's tough because there's just a lot of things that you need to get right. Not only do you need to know and have the tools to solder, but you've also got to be able to troubleshoot an air system and make everything airtight. So there are some things to keep in mind there. Additionally, this design in particular, it's a good design. It could use some refinement in some ways. And here at Frontline Foam, we're constantly trying to optimize things. So things may change here and there. But the point is if you're going to be building this, do anticipate that you may run into some hiccups. Sometimes you're just going to have to tinker with something, or, I'm supposed to put this pin here, but it's not really fitting. Just be ready for that to happen and be ready to have to improvise or kind of tinker on your own to figure things out. Just a heads up. But overall, I really recommend this blaster. HPA is really cool when you get into it. In front of us, we have all of the parts that we're going to need to build the HPA U Talon Claw. We've got the printed parts, which can be bought on our website, and we've also got the hardware, which can also be bought on the website. So we've got everything here, and ideally, if you get everything from us, whether it's the hardware kit and you print it yourself or you get both, you'll be able to follow along and have a good time. Some notes about this particular hardware kit. We're using U channel, obviously. And this U channel is wrapped in a carbon fiber wrap. It's really just a sticker, if I'm being honest with you guys. And it looks really cool when it's all done. I just want to give you guys a fair warning that not only does it look really cool and it can really make for a very aesthetic blaster, just be warned, it is a sticker. So if you drop your blaster or if you let it, bump a tree or something, the sticker can peel. So just be aware, and just a heads up. So let's go ahead and get our storm regulator out and get it prepped to get in the blaster. Right, so we've got a couple of important things here. With it, you've got some extra O-rings. Definitely hang on to those. You got a cool looking patch. It's technically an airsoft regulator, but still looks cool. What we're going to need to do to this, and hang on to this Allen key. This is going to serve as our key for adjusting the pressure on our regulator. So if you want to turn up or down the power of your blaster, this is going to be what you're going to need. Right, so what we need to do is we're going to need to take a big wrench and take off this piece here. So I've got this big wrench here. I'm going to want to grab onto this hex nut, not this one, and you really want to make sure you get a good grip on it because this is pretty in there. I'll just leave it at that. It's pretty tough to get out, so you're going to want to get some good leverage, make sure you've got a stable grip, and be careful not to let the jaws of whatever wrench you're using scrape the metal here on the regulator. So just be prepared for that. You're probably going to see me shaking the camera everywhere because I'm trying to get leverage on this to get it out. So just bear with me for a second. Okay, so I had to step into the other room to get good leverage on it, but we were able to get that darn thing out. There's some sort of sealant or special Loctite that really keeps it tight, and unfortunately I did ding it, so I confess to that. So that's my mistake. But yeah, so just be careful with it. Anyways, we were able to get that bit out. Now what we need to do is put in our new attachment. We're going to take this, and this already has, luckily, some tape on it. And we're going to feed that in there and get that nice and tight. Right, so we tightened it down, and I'm tightening it down quite a bit, but I'm honestly just going to take it to a point where I feel like it's snug enough, and then I'm going to see if it leaks later, because I don't want to end up over-tightening this or causing any damage. So, we've got that in there. Let's move on. So we're going to need our super core, these two fittings. Don't go, stay. And we're going to be using our electric solenoid here. So I'm going to pop open this box and we'll get moving. With the solenoid, we need to, and I can't tell you exactly how everything works here, so I'm sorry I can't tell you why, but what I do know that we need to do is we do need to flip something around in here. So there are just two screws here. Just going to gently take these out. Make sure I hang on to all the pieces. Oh, yeah, don't lose this spring or gasket. So there's a little spring there. It's okay if it comes out of this housing. I need to get this little piston out. There we go. So just working on taking this thing apart gently. There's a little washer here, so just be ready for that to kind of move on you. Also loosening these two screws on the bottom. So we've got our little piston thingy. I'm just going to gently pull on it from the back here, flip this around, and then put this back in, just like that. Then, where the piston has the hole in it, up top, I'm going to slide this, the spring goes into that piston, so this goes back on here, and then these two small screws go in place here. Make sure our gasket is lined up and everything, it should fit nicely. Good and hand tight, nothing crazy. This should be spring loaded, that's correct. Now this is going to go back on, and then these screws are going to tighten down again. Whoop. So because I fumbled it, I just had to go double check. But this button is going to be, there's going to be a button here and a single hole here. That's how it's going to be oriented. Let's just get it all back together now. There we go. And then this is going to go back on. Oops, no, that's backwards, silly me. Like this. And then this nut's going to go back right where it came from. Now something to note is that this can actually spin around. You know, it can go either direction. I'm just going to leave it this direction for now. We're going to see how we want to orient it later. You can actually do either way, but we're just going to make sure our wiring is going to agree with everything later. So that's what we got to do to the solenoid. What we're going to do now is we're going to get the air system all put together. So, like I said, bottle's going to go in here. It's going to go through the hose, up to this elbow, through the solenoid, through this joint, and then into the super core, and then barrel over here. That's just the general mapping. And I just want to get the overall assembly of the air system going, just to make sure we can get everything airtight. This is Teflon tape, highly recommend. In fact, this is basically a necessity if we're going to get this thing airtight. So you're going to need that on you, of course. Right, so let's see. Let's start with this. We're going to come back here. You have the P and the R. We're going to throw this elbow joint on the P. This elbow joint has an O-ring on it, as you can see, so we don't need to stress about leakage there. It's going to seal itself, which is great. Come kind of the general rule of thumb is don't go too crazy tightening anything down. We just want to get things to the point that they're, nice and functional. So I'm going to take my Teflon tape here, get a fresh bit of going, and I'm going to put some Teflon tape on this little connector here. Now, the rule with Teflon tape is you got to imagine how the joint is, how it's threading into its piece. So obviously we're going to be spinning clockwise into the supercore here. So we want to wrap it such that it's not going to unwind as we screw it in. So I'm going to spin this clockwise to wind up Teflon tape around it. And I'm just going to go around probably 3 times. We'll see how that goes. And we're also going to do the other side just to have it ready. And hopefully it doesn't fall off on us. So the same thing, just going to keep it spinning clockwise. And you kind of gotta hold it until you can come around and loop it once, and then it kind of sticks. And then you can keep going. Obviously, we don't want that, so I'm just going to poke and get that out of the way. There we go. All right, so those are on there. Perfect. Now we're just going to feed one end into this here, and the Teflon tape is going to, help us be airtight. So this is going to bottom out. You'll feel it when it stops. And ideally, we have enough Teflon tape there so we start to feel a resistance as it hits the bottom. That's what we want for it to become airtight. Now, I'm just going to take this hose real quick. This simply kind of clicks into this joint. If you want to take the hose out, you need to push down on this plastic bushing and then pull on the hose. But it's kind of a one-way little click in system there. We're going to need to take it apart later. And then boom, click it into the same one, same style of joint. And now we take our supercore and we're just going to obviously make sure it threads correctly and screw that on. And I'm going to try and angle it such that the letters point out to the left here. And kind of leaving it just like that. Let's see if it's airtight. Ideally, you guys have your own tank that you can screw in right now to make sure that it's working. I've got this little adapter here that's going to let me plug it into my air compressor, which definitely makes things easier. There we go. We're all connected. And this is what should happen. The supercore should extend. And I am hearing a leak, so I'll have to find that in a second, but let's just make sure that our solenoid is working. You can push on this button here. See that? All right, so the overall mechanics of it are working, but we need to find this leak. The key for finding out leaks is obviously keep the pressure. I'm not going to unplug it or anything. And the goal is just to listen for it. So I'm going to be putting this up next to my ear, really listening for where the leak is coming from, and then seeing what I can do to fix it. All right, so putting it right up next to my ear and actually kind of holding my finger here, I can tell that the air is kind of coming out of this joint. So I'm going to twist it tighter. And it unfortunately still leaks. So unlucky me, what that means is I'm going to need to undo it, reapply some Teflon tape, probably more, and give it another try. Go for that air tightness. So yeah, that's the general troubleshooting is undo it, apply a new coat of Teflon tape, preferably more, and then give it another try. So I'm going to be doing that for the next minute or two. All right, so we got it. I did have to turn it just one more rotation to get the leak taken care of, but it was as simple as just doing it again, adding some more Teflon tape this time to get it all put together. So we've got no leaks now. The entire system is airtight. It's really nice that we don't need to worry about any of these. This is the most common culprit, really. The fit into the supercore and then the fit of this joint into the solenoid. So now that we've got all this taken care of, we've got our airtight system going, so that's a big step. Okay, so now we've got lots of things to do. I went ahead and just popped the hose out of our regulator. I'm going to take my little adapter off. And this regulator needs to now fit into the lower part of the grip on the handle. It's going to slide in like so, obviously. And I'm just going to make sure that this is free of any yucky filament. So I'm going to quickly file this out, and then it's going to be a pretty stiff little push fit, at least with our prints. It's a pretty decent little push fit. So I'm going to get that regulator nice and settled in there. All right, so we got our regulator in there. Perfect. Gonna set this aside and we'll move on. So a couple things. We're gonna be working on the wiring and just kind of getting things settled into the blaster, the grip here. I use these switches here. In the past, I've actually broken off these lever arms, but today they've sometimes given me issues. Today I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave this lever arm on the switch, and I'm going to let you know if I do end up taking it off later. Additionally, I think I'm going to turn this to face backwards. I'm going to try this. I've done it both ways, and I still haven't really figured out which way is the best, but I'm going to do it to the back this time so you guys can try and follow along. If I change that, I'll let you guys know. So what's going to happen here is we're going to feed this hose down through the grip, and there's a proper little tunnel for it. There we go. And we're going to have it come down and into the regulator, just like that. And now what we need to do, so it looks like our hose may be a little long. We'll see if we need to trim that down later. We're going to get this piece on to this thing here. Now, obviously, you know, that's a bit of a tight squeeze. So what you honestly kind of have to do is you need to pry this open and slide it around. Now, the smartest thing to do would be to actually unscrew this, or rather do this after putting this in between. I really like making sure that the system is airtight first. But if you guys need to, you can always just take this off, pop it off, slide this plastic on, and then get it going. But for now, I'm just going to kind of pry it around. So give me a second. There we go. So it looks like, as you can tell, the whole thing's kind of pointing down, the supercore is. So it looks like our hose is too long in the back here, so it's kind of forcing the whole thing to angle down. So I'm actually going to pop the whole thing out, trim my hose just ever so slightly, and then slide it all back in. Okay, so I went ahead and I trimmed my hose, put it back in, popped it out, so I know the hose is the right length. Now let's kind of work on the wiring here. I'm going to start with this guy. On the print you can see off and on, as well as on the switch, off and on. It really helps to make sure that those agree with each other as we put it into the print. Now, you can just put it in like this, but you risk the switch popping through later. So a quick modification that I like to do is drill a quick hole into the bottom there and feed a screw through that. I'm going to be using one of these little shell screws. And what I just did is I just went ahead and trimmed the screw to just the right length, such that when I tighten down the screw, it fits, it will just squeeze barely onto the switch. Boom, already felt it touch, and now the switch is secure. Notice that I also drilled the hole off to the side because this back plate is going to need to share space. This little elbow joint is going to need this room here, so I moved it over to the side. So we've got that going for us, which is great. This piece is going to sit on the back here, and we're going to have this connector feed through the blaster and out the front here to our battery. And this one we're actually going to change so that way it feeds to the solenoid and to our switch. So let's get to that. So we're going to take our switch, we're going to keep this end right here, and we're actually going to snip off this end. Just like that, don't need that. Gonna peel these wires apart. And I am going to, in fact, it doesn't matter which one we use, but for now, I'm going to match black to black, I guess. I'm going to cut this one about in half, and I'm going to strip it. And we're going to take a solenoid wire, so this is going to fit right on the back here. So we need to imagine that our wire has to come down and meet with one of these solenoid wires. Hope that makes sense, but essentially one wire needs to now join with that. So I'm just kind of eyeballing the distance that I want here. So I'm going to go ahead and snip this one right here. Just either or. I'm going to strip that, and now I'm going to solder the two together and put some heat shrink on it. Very nice. So we've got the wires soldered together, we've got them joined, and it's a little long, but better too long than too short. So we're gonna have to tuck it in later, but it's gonna fit in there and connect these two. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna imagine, if this wire is feeding through and then out towards the front, right? We need this to bend down towards our switch. I did pop that little lever off, by the way. It's going to come down to our switch, which is going to be about right here. So I'm really hoping that this visualization that I'm giving actually helps. So if I'm imagining, this wire feeding down, I can safely cut off a little under an inch. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Strip that. And then I'm going to solder this wire to this switch. Now, the two joints that we're going to be using on this switch, we're going to first solder this wire to this joint. It can technically be either one, but just for the sake of following along, I'm going to do this one. So it's the one labeled COM. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this other solenoid wire, and we're going to imagine that, so if you remember, we've got the switch up here. We need this other solenoid wire to come around to that switch. So I'm gonna, let's see here. I'm gonna imagine it feeds through here, right? And then around and through. Yeah, just like that. And the solenoid's right there. Good wire management, I'd say about that long. Just gonna give it a pinch and snip it there. And then I'm going to solder this joint onto this prong here, the prong labeled NC. Now, if you wire it the same as me, your blaster is going to fire when you pull the trigger. And then when you release the trigger, it's going to chamber another dart. However, and this is up to you, but I recommend that way. You can also solder it here, and what that will result in is when you release the trigger, it fires the dart, and when you pull the trigger, it chambers it. So that would leave an open breech if you wanted. I actually soldered this wrong. What I was saying was the opposite. So if you want the blaster to fire on trigger pull and then chamber on release, we're going to solder like so. You can flip these really, it doesn't matter, but just make sure you have one soldered to COM and one soldered to NO. No. But yeah. So we're gonna strip, tin, and solder this guy right here. There we go, just like that. All right, so I know it looks like a tangled mess, but we're gonna make it look better. Don't worry, we're gonna tuck it all in. So we're gonna have this back plate sitting back here. Make sure we're not pinching anything. Get this wire, you know, down and out of the way. Okay, almost. There we go. And then these wires, we're gonna feed through this little gap here into the plastic. Tighten that back down again because it keeps loosening. There we go. This one as well is just going to poke out the front here. Just like that. And now this switch, what's actually going to happen is this switch is going to sit like so, and a pin is going to feed through here. And it's roughly going to look like this. So I'm going to quickly put some screws through the back here. I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3 in case I need to take it off later. So this is future me speaking, but before you put it all together, make sure to put these hex inserts in their slots back here. Don't forget it because it's impossible to get them in later, as I learned the hard way. They just simply fit in their slots, and then you can take one of these screws and feed it in through the back, and that'll secure those in so they don't fall out. All right, so let's feed this back down. Get it through that tunnel. We just got to be a little more careful now to make sure we're not pinching any wires. Okay, that's in place. Make sure our wires are going into this kind of gap here. And then get it all closed up. Very good. Sweet. Now, as you can see, there are 2 holes. Here I have another switch for reference. There are 2 holes in the switch, right? And there are also 2 holes here. So we need to get pins to go through each of those. So let's get that working. All right, so it took some finagling, but we were able to get a pin. Notice that this one doesn't have a hole on the other side, but this one does. So I used a bit longer of a pin on this side, this one here. But I was able to get a pin through each of those holes on the switches. You just gotta, toy it in and, make sure your wires are out of the way, but was able to get that working, which is awesome. So with all of that wiring and air putting together, we're going to go ahead and test it out. So first, going to plug in my battery. Going to also put in my adapter, or in your case, it could be an air tank. Get that going. Air compressor. Flip it on. And now I'm just going to use the screwdriver for now to poke the button to simulate a trigger press. So I pull the trigger, fire, retract, release the trigger, chamber a new dart, pull the trigger, fire and retract, release the trigger, chamber a new dart. So everything's working nicely. And while you're here, listen to it again, make sure nothing's leaking, and just double check everything. Make sure you haven't pinched any wires and that everything's in place. And then we'll go from there. Right, so with this all put together, I'm going to set this aside for a moment, and we're going to work on the other pieces. We're going to put in our hex inserts. Get those nice and pushed into place. And as soon as you know that it's seated all the way, I can tell it's not quite all the way in there. I can see a gap still. I'm going to push it down. Go on. There must still be something in there. Anyways, I'm going to tinker with this, get these seated, and as soon as they're seated all the way, you can just put some of those same screws through the back here to secure those in place. Okay, so that took some finesse, but I was able to get those in there. These were a little over tightened, but that's all right. I really just wanted to make sure that they don't stick out at all. I did cheat with this a little bit, so put that back aside. There was just a little piece of filament on either side that I had to get out, that's all. Right, so now what we need to do is another little modification. I am going to be installing this mag release, right? And we're going to be putting in our own little peg for the spring to hook onto. Now, unfortunately, I don't know what really happened, but there is supposed to be a hole here, but the hole kind of aligns poorly because we're going to have a bolt later that actually feeds across, so we can't have the screw right there where it looks like it tried to print. And besides, I want to offset the spring anyways, so I'm going to drill the hole actually towards this bottom edge in the more solid piece of plastic. And then from there, I can feed what is going to be the spring hook. Very nice. So that screw position corresponds with the side at which our other hook is. So now we're going to take our spring and hook it around each component here. Looks like I'm going to need to back this one out in order to get the spring around it. There we are. And now the mag release is going to fall into place, and we're going to line up that hole with this peg here, or this pin hole, and feed our pin through. There we go. So now I know that the pin is partially in this bit of plastic and this one, but most importantly through the entire thing. Now, I'm going to set this aside and we'll keep going. Now what we've got here is the front half of the mag well. I'm going to quickly just clean up this inner ring. There was a bit of a elephant's foot from the printer. I'm going to take this really nice looking piece from the Supercore, and that's going to fit in here. And I'm just going to make sure it's going to fit. Right now it's definitely feeling tight, so I'm just going to make sure that things are okay here. Yeah, it's going to be a tight fit, but that's all right. I actually need to back this back out now, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one nut in each of these holes, and then these bigger screws are going to feed in through the bottom, tighten through the nuts, and then push into this brass here to keep it nice and secure. So let's get that done. All right, so that was a pretty tight fit, but we were able to get this nice and flush. The threaded end points out this way. So now we've got those two bits going for us. We're getting there. Let's take our U channel and let's get this thing put together. We're getting really close. So this piece is going to fit here. And you feel that all kind of slide into place. I'm feeling where the dent in the carbon fiber is, just poking a little hole for our screw. I'm going to feed our screw in and then tighten that down. And you got to make sure that things line up. For now, we're just going to do one side. We got this one secure. We're going to slide on this piece next. Now, something I did do earlier is actually file in this groove to make sure that it fit around the carbon fiber wrap nicely, because I don't want it to peel it back as I use it. So just going to be gentle here and get that all into place. It's going to kind of squeeze the super core, and that's all right. It needs to be nice and secure anyways. Find our holes, poke through each of these, and then we're going to feed 2 more screws. In fact, really just 1 more because I have yet to put those in. I was mistaken earlier. This version actually lets us put a nut in there if we'd like to do it like that. But it is falling out, so maybe it is better that we just use this thick one. Get that into place, and get the other side. I did the wrong side. Okay, so we got all the screws but this one in the mag well. Let's go ahead and do the other side. Okay, so don't do the other side yet. Make sure you put in the trigger first, unlike me. Right, so notice there are 2 holes here. We're going to be using the front hole, so the pin's going to go through that front hole and then through the trigger. Very nice. We can hear the clicking of the switch. That's really important. I'm going to tuck this little spring behind the trigger just to give it a little bit better of a feel. It returns a little bit better now. Very nice. Now we're going to put this thing back on. Okay, now with this left bar on, now because the magwell's open, I can get these remaining hex nuts into their, or standoffs into their spots just fine from here. Just going to keep a finger on it to hold it in and then secure this side and then move on to the next side. All right, very nice. Now, I'm actually not going to put this on right now, but I'll briefly explain where it goes and what it does. This piece is essentially just a rail that you can slip up here. It's easier to put in earlier when you're tightening everything down. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. It does, what you can do is you can put a bolt through here and a nut right there, and then that secures it nicely. It's a nice place to put a sight or something if you'd like. Very nice. So we've got all this taken care of. Let's go ahead and put on these side panels. What I'm going to do is line these up, get the holes lined up, and then it's going to be 440 screws, and then the big machined ones, these guys, are going to go through either side like this. All right, so here we are. Now, lastly, I did actually drill out this hole earlier, but this little battery cover just slides in just like that. Click, click, and then what you can do is you can take this little thumb screw, and beware, you may need to drill yours out, but you can put that in there, and that secures the battery in place. Now, a side note, these batteries do work. They're just a really, really tight fit. So be aware, just a heads up on that. I would perhaps look into maybe something smaller. But now we're going to take this fancy double screw thing, and this is going to go through here. A little tight because of the print. And then this screw is going to feed through the other side, and it's just going to tighten down over that regulator. Nice and snug, holding everything in place. And, well, that sums up most of the build here. Good progress. Let's see if it shoots. Gonna put in our little adapter. Of course, you just be screwing in your tank. Gonna undo the battery cover here. Just because it's gonna take a solid minute, I'm actually not gonna squeeze in the battery. I'm just gonna kind of hang on to it with my hand over here. Be real careful. But yeah, if you're really careful, you can get those in. Make sure our magazine works. Good. It's gonna be a nice grab drop. We've got this barrel here. It's actually brass on the inside. Very nice. This muzzle, this isn't ours, but it's a nice touch. Threaded ends on either side, so really easy for swapping and such. But yeah, just gonna throw in our barrel, throw in our magazine, plug it into the air compressor real quick, and it should be ready to go. Oh, and of course we should turn it on in the back. So, grab my hose. Very nice. And then, very nice. Okay, let's see it. Oh, yeah, that is one caveat. If you wired it up this way, you need to hold the trigger down in order to load a magazine. Then you let the bolt close. That was odd. That must have been a really bad dart, but yeah, really solid. Anyways, there it is, folks, the HPA U Talon Claw. Like I said, a pretty challenging build. I mean, you may have noticed that I kind of struggled in some areas. I was forgetting things and had to backtrack and everything. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. It's fun putting these out, and I really hope these are helpful. Anyways, I'll catch you next time. Thanks.